Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. As you know, I'm always here to give solution to topics in Cambridge International AS and A-Level Mathematics 9709. Uh, Today's video, I am going to be talking about a particular aspect, a particular objective under Pure Mathematics 1, especially the first topic, which is uh, quadratics. And the objectives, this is Pure Maths 1, paper 1. The second objective is to find the discriminants of quadratic polynomial as squared plus bs plus c and use the discriminants to determine the number of real roots of equation as squared plus bs plus c equals to 0, and the knowledge of the term of repeated roots is included. Now, let's go to the class and following this objective. This is the objective we want to achieve today. So before the end of this class, I'm not going to wait till the end. Before the end of this class, as you watch this video, you should be able to proudly tell me or proudly say that you can find the discriminant of quadratic polynomial, and you can use the discriminant to determine how many roots a quadratic equation has. So let's move straightly to the classroom. Discriminant of quadratic equation. Now, what are the new words that we come across today? Our new words that we come across today. The first one is quadratic formula. Quadratic formula. So we are going to come across what is quadratic formula. 2, we are going to come across what is roots of quadratic formula, roots of quadratic equation, root of quadratic equation, root of quadratic equation, and we are going to talk about the discriminant. Discriminant of quadratic equation. So these three keywords, the first one is quadratic formula, the roots, and discriminants. So let me start by telling us what is the first one. What is quadratic formula? Quadratic formula. Now, as you can see, it says formula. It means what we can use to determine the value or the solution of a quadratic equation, the method or the formula that can be used, the method or formula that can be used to determine the value or solution of a quadratic equation. So, and generally, quadratic formula is given as x equals to minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This is quadratic formula. This is called quadratic formula. So let's keep it aside. So quadratic formula, it is the formula that we can use to determine the roots or the solution of quadratic equation. That's the first one. So when I mention quadratic formula, I'm talking about this formula, x equals to minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. That is quadratic formula. So don't forget that. Don't forget quadratic formula. So when I mention it, you know what I'm talking about as the lesson continues. So the second keywords or the second new word that we need to learn in this class today is roots of quadratic equation. Roots of quadratic equation. So what do we mean by the roots of quadratic equation? You can also call it solutions of quadratic equation. So solutions of quadratic equation are the values for the variable, the value of x, when you use the quadratic formula to solve a quadratic equation. The value of x when you use the quadratic formula to solve quadratic equation. So the answer you will get are called the root of quadratic equation. As you can see here, uh, the maximum number of roots you can have in a quadratic equation are 2. So that is why you have plus or minus, plus or minus. So the maximum you can have is 2, plus and minus. So roots of quadratic equation means the solution of quadratic equation. So the maximum number of solutions you can have when you solve a quadratic equation are 2. You can have 2, you can have only 1 sometimes. Sometimes you may not have any solution for your quadratic equation. And how do we know whether you are going to get 2 roots or 1 root or no root at all? Is that clear? Now, apart from using the quadratic formula to solve a quadratic equation to know the number of roots, so the number of roots of quadratic equation, another thing that root of quadratic equation is telling us is how many times. It's also telling us how many times the graph of quadratic equation intersects the x-axis. How many times? I'm still talking about the roots. Don't forget, I'm still talking about the root of quadratic equation. Let's say this is our x-axis. Let me just put it like this: x-axis, x-axis. This is x-axis, x-axis, x-axis. Now, let's assume that when we draw the graph of our quadratic equation, the graph is like this. Or sometimes when you draw it, you have something like this. Sometimes when you draw it, you have something like this. Okay, so this can also be uh, like this without touching the x, or it can be like this, touching x at one place and face downward, or it can be like this, touching x in 2 places and face downward. So these are the possible solutions we can have. That is, here the graph of quadratic equation does not touch the x-axis, either the one that is facing up or the one that is facing down. It doesn't touch the x-axis. So in this case, we say there is no root for the quadratic equation, no root. So when we are talking about root, it means no solution. Then the second one, you can see the graph that face up or the one that faces down, the one that faces up and the one that faces down, both of them touch the x-axis at one point. It means the solution of this quadratic equation is only one solution, that is only one real root. But if you look at the third one, this is no roots, no solution. This one is one solution, and this one is two solution, two solution. So two solution or two roots. That's the meaning of roots. So you can call this one solution or roots. This one is also solution or roots. So when we say roots, it means the solution that you have when you draw the graph of quadratic function or when you solve a quadratic equation using a quadratic formula that we talk about here. Don't forget the quadratic formula is minus b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac under a square root sign all divided by 2a. I hope that is clear. So these are the first two new words that we come across. So the third one that I need to quickly explain now, the third new words that we need to explain quickly is saying discriminant. What is the meaning of discriminant? what is the meaning of discriminant. So we want to explain what discriminant is all about. What is the meaning of discriminant? Now, discriminant is the part of quadratic formula. The part, if you look at this quadratic formula, you have x, you have minus b, you have b squared minus 4ac under a radical or under a square root sign, you have 2a. So, but this particular part is the part we are paying attention to. This particular part that is under this square root sign is called the discriminant. So the discriminant d of a quadratic equation is the part of the quadratic formula that is under the square root sign. So, and it is b squared minus 4ac. So b squared minus 4ac is called the discriminant. B squared minus 4ac is called the discriminant. So that is what we mean by discriminant of quadratic equation. So don't forget, the new words are quadratic formula, roots, and discriminants. So now we can go quickly to our class to discuss about the discriminant of quadratic equation and how to use the discriminant of quadratic equation to determine the number of roots a quadratic equation has. Okay, let's quickly leave this place and go to our class now. Let's leave this place and go to our class now. Okay, so what we mean, I have actually explained what discriminant is. So let's now go into finding discriminant and using discriminant to determine the number of roots a quadratic equation we have. I have told you before that discriminants of quadratic equation, discriminant of quadratic equation, which we can replace by letter D, is equal to b squared minus 4ac. Don't forget, b squared minus 4ac is under the square root sign when you write the quadratic formula. So if I give you the quadratic formula, you can see that. Let me write the quadratic formula up here so that we can be looking at it. Minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So this part that is under the square root sign, b squared minus 4ac, is the main focus of this video. That is the discriminant. The main focus of this video is the discriminant. That's the main focus of the video that I am doing today. So, and it's our discriminant. So we want to talk about it. Now, discriminants, that is the part of quadratic formula under the square root sign, can be a number less than 0, can be 0, can be greater than 0. That is, when you solve and under your radical, under this sign, you can have 0, you can have a number that is less than 0, you can have a number that is greater than 0. You can have number that is 0, you can have less than 0, you can have greater than 0. So b squared minus 4ac can give you 0. B squared minus 4ac can give you a number that is not up to 0, maybe negative number. Or b squared minus 4ac can give you a number that is greater than 0, maybe 1, maybe 0.5, maybe 5, 10, 16, 64, and so on. So that is what we determine. Now, when the discriminant is if our b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0. That is when you solve and under this place you have 0. It means your root will only be minus b over 2a. Your root, because if everything, square root of 0 will be 0, so it means the only root that you are going to have will be minus b over 2a. It means you are going to have only one root, only one real root. Only one real root of quadratic equation. Your quadratic equation will have only one real root. And what is that real root? It will just be minus b over 2a. That is what your real root will be. It will be only one real root. And the real root will be minus b over 2a. But again, if b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, let's say it's less than 0. Now, what are we going to have? Less than 0. Let me write it very well. Let me write it very well. If it is less than 0, we say less than 0. So if it is less than 0, it means we have no real roots. Less than 0, I told you I said it in my last video, that a number less than 0, when a number less than 0, the number can be negative number. It is negative. Any number less than 0 is negative. So it can be negative 1, it can be negative 2, and so on. So it means if our discriminant is negative, that's what I mean by discriminant less than 0. The discriminant can be negative. So that is discriminant less than 0. In that case, we are going to have no real roots. There won't be any real roots because the discriminant is less than 0. It's going to be an imaginary number, because square root of a negative number is an imaginary number. Is that clear? It's not a real number. It's not a real number. We call it complex number. Is that clear? Okay. So the third one, the third condition is when the discriminant is greater than 0, discriminant b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, is greater than 0. If your discriminant is greater than 0, then what will happen to the roots? Greater than 0 means the number under this radical, under the square root sign, can be 1. Square root of 1, as you know, is 1. So you can have plus or minus 1. So you are going to have two real roots. You are going to have two real roots. So in that case, you are going to have two real roots. You are going to have two real roots. So we will be having two real roots. Two real roots. So you can have only one real root. You can have no real roots. You can have two real roots. Only one real root, two real roots, and no real roots. When I say real, it means a root that is a real number, not an imaginary number. A real number. Is that clear? Okay. And I think I've explained that. Let me quickly say this using a simple illustration of a graph. That is the graph of each of them. Now, let me take it again from here. If you have only one real root, it means the parabola, the graph of the quadratic function, we touch the x-axis only at a point, either like this or either like this. It will only touch at a point. It will only touch at a point. It does not touch 2 points. So if your parabola is upward facing or is downward facing, that is, it's facing downward, it will only touch the x-axis at 1 point. Or if it's upward, it only touches the x-axis at 1 point. It does not touch more than 1 point. That shows that the discriminant is equal to 0. The discriminant is equal to 0. It means you have only one solution for your quadratic equation. The second one, is when you have your discriminant that is less than zero. Less than zero. Look at your x-axis. It means you will have no real roots. When is it that there is no real root? It means the parabola either is facing up or is facing down, does not touch the x-axis at all. Does not touch the x-axis at all. So if you draw your graph, maybe your graph is like this and you draw something like this, you didn't touch the x-axis. This is x and this is y. You didn't touch the x-axis at any point. It means the discriminant b squared minus 4ac is less than 0. That is why you did not touch the x-axis. Your graph did not touch the x-axis. I believe that is clear. So let's go to the third one. When the discriminant touches, when the graph touches the x-axis at 2 points. So the third one is this. We have b squared minus 4ac greater than 0. And we say we are going to have two real roots. How does the graph look like? It looks like this. Okay, is our x-axis. Then our graph can be, okay, either like this, that is facing up, or it can face down. It can face down and be like this. Now, if you look at these two graphs, each of them touches the x-axis at two distinct points. In that case, we'll say the quadratic equation has two real roots because the discriminant b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0. Here, b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0. Here, b squared minus 4ac is less than 0. So if you look at this graph, you can see that the parabola, the two of them, did not touch the x-axis. It means there is no real root. Here, the parabola touches the x-axis at two distinct points. It means we have two real roots for this. And that is how we use the discriminant of a quadratic equation to determine the number of roots a quadratic equation will have. Is that clear? So I believe you can still remember our new words for today, the quadratic formula, which is x equals to minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And I explained what the root of quadratic equation is. These are the solutions of quadratic equation. I told you that the maximum number of solutions we can have for a quadratic function of a quadratic equation are 2. We can have less, we cannot have more. We can have 2, we can have 1, we can have no roots. Now, and I told you what do we use to find out how many roots your quadratic function will have, even before you solve to know the roots. You can use your discriminant. And I told you what discriminant is. Discriminant is a part of the quadratic formula, x equals to minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. This part of the formula that is under the radical, under the square root sign, b squared minus 4ac is called the discriminant. Don't forget. Now, let's just take one example before the end of this video. Just example to know before the end of this video. Okay. Let me take this off first quickly. Yeah. Good. Okay. Now, let's say we have the quadratic function x squared plus 2s plus 3 equals 0. Let's find the discriminant. Discriminant will be b squared minus 4ac. Don't forget, our standard quadratic function is as squared plus bs plus c equals 0. That is standard quadratic equation. That is as squared plus bs plus c, standard quadratic equation. Now, when you compare this to this, you can see that our a equals to 1, b equals to 2, and c equals to 3. So c equals to 3. C equals to 3. Let me write it clearly. C equals to 3. So using the formula, discriminant equals to b squared minus 4ac. So we can say that our discriminant equals to b squared, that is 2 squared, minus 4 times a, 1, times c, 3. So which is going to give us 4 minus 12, which is going to be minus 8. Now, minus 8 is less than 0. It means our discriminant is less than 0. And when discriminant is less than 0, it means we have no real root, no real roots, no real roots. So if you draw the graph of this, see how the graph will look like. Is our x-axis. Now, because a, the coefficient of x squared is positive, it means you will have a parabola that faces up. So it means it will be like this. It will be like this. So your parabola will face up, is positive, and it will not touch the x-axis because it has no real root. So if you sketch the graph of this, it's going to be exactly like this. That is the example. I believe that is very clear. Thank you for that. Okay, let me take one more example so that you can understand better. One more example. Okay, let's say we have another quadratic equation given as x squared plus 4x plus 2 equals 0. X squared plus 4x plus 2 equals 0. You know that if we compare this, we are going to have our a will be 1, our b will be 4, and c will be 2. So if you want to determine the discriminant, will now be, which is b squared. Don't forget our discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. That is the discriminant. So we give us b squared will be 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2. So 4 squared will be 16 minus 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. That is 16 minus 8, which is going to give us 8. You can see that this is positive 8. And this 8, positive 8, is bigger than, that is greater than 0. So, and when our discriminant is greater than 0, then it means we are going to have two real roots, two real roots. And how will the graph look like? The graph will now look like this. This is our x-axis. This is our x-axis. And because the a, if you look at a in this function, is positive 1. So it's going to face up. It's going to face up. So we are going to have two real roots, and it's going to be like this. So these are the two real roots. These are the two real roots. So the graph will look like this for this quadratic equation. That's the second example. So one more before we end this video. One more before we end this video. One more before we end this video. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's say we have another question, which is 2s squared. Let me put it minus 2s. Okay, let's just be 2s squared 2x squared, sorry, 2x squared plus 4x plus 2. 2x squared plus 4x plus 2 equals to 0. So let's look at the discriminant of this and know how many roots it's going to have. So if you compare this, you know our A is going to be 2, B is going to be 4, and C is going to be 2. So we can say that the discriminant D, which is B squared minus 4AC, our discriminant B squared minus 4AC will now give us B squared is 4 squared minus 4 bracket 2 bracket 2. So what do we have? That is 16 minus 4 times 2, 8 times 2, 16, 16. That is 0. So our discriminant is 0. So when discriminant is 0, it means what that signifies is that we have only one real root. Only one real root. It means your quadratic equation will produce only one real root, and the graph of the equation will take this shape. So this our graph will be like this. This is the x-axis. Since it has only one real root and the coefficient of x here is positive 2, so it's going to face up. It's going to face up and it's going to touch the x-axis at a point. So this is the type of graph you are going to have. This is the type of graph you are going to have for that. So I believe you understood this video very well. If you have listened to it, I want you to listen to it again. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can be able to watch all other videos that we release in this channel. So if you have any other question, you can post to us on our email. Thank you. I'm happy to leave you now. Thank you very much.